The story of Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, is one of the most remarkable narratives in Islamic history, filled with trials, triumphs, and deep spiritual lessons. It is a tale of unwavering faith, patience in the face of hardship, and the ultimate power of forgiveness. Unlike many other prophets whose stories are scattered across various chapters of the Quran, the life of Yusuf is uniquely presented in a single surah, Surah Yusuf, detailing his journey from a beloved son to a betrayed brother, from a slave to a prisoner, and ultimately, from a prisoner to a ruler. Every chapter of his life carries profound wisdom, offering believers a timeless guide on how to endure suffering, maintain trust in divine justice, and rise above betrayal with grace and mercy. Yusuf's story begins with a dream, a vision of greatness that would take years of hardship and perseverance to unfold. His journey is filled with unimaginable betrayals. First by his own brothers, who, consumed by jealousy, plotted against him, and later by the very people who were meant to protect him. Yet despite the darkness that surrounded him, he never lost sight of his faith. His trials took him from the depths of a well to the depths of an Egyptian prison. But through every difficulty, his heart remained steadfast in the belief that Allah's plan was greater than any suffering he endured. His unwavering patience was eventually rewarded, as the same brothers who once abandoned him later stood before him in need, unaware that the ruler they sought help from was the very brother they had wronged. One of the most extraordinary aspects of Yusuf's story is his ability to forgive. Instead of seeking vengeance on those who betrayed him, he chose compassion over anger, proving that true strength lies not in revenge, but in mercy. His story is not just about personal resilience, but also about the power of reconciliation, showing that even the deepest wounds can heal when guided by faith. The lessons from his life transcend time, offering guidance to anyone facing betrayal, injustice, or hardship. His unwavering trust in Allah, despite being cast into darkness time and time again, is a testament to the ultimate triumph of patience and righteousness. Yusuf, peace be upon him, was the beloved son of Prophet Yaqub, a father who cherished him deeply. From a young age, Yusuf possessed a special purity that set him apart from his brothers. His father, recognizing his noble character and the light of wisdom within him, held him close to his heart. However, this affection did not go unnoticed by his older brothers, who felt overshadowed and consumed by jealousy. They believed that their father's love should be equally, if not more, distributed among them, and they resented Yusuf for what they perceived as favoritism. Though Prophet Yaqub treated his sons fairly, he could sense the growing envy in their hearts, a silent storm that threatened to tear the family apart. One night, a dream came to Yusuf, a vision unlike anything he had ever experienced before. In this dream, he saw 11 stars, along with the sun and the moon, bowing before him in reverence. Filled with wonder, he rushed to his father at the first light of dawn, eager to share what he had seen. Prophet Yaqub, a man of great wisdom, immediately understood the significance of the dream. It was a divine message foretelling Yusuf's future greatness, a destiny guided by Allah's will. The dream was a sign that Yusuf was chosen for a special path, one that would elevate him in both status and righteousness. Yet despite his joy at hearing his son's vision, Yaqub also felt a deep concern. He knew that if Yusuf's brothers were to hear of this dream, their envy would turn into something far more dangerous. With a heavy heart, he warned Yusuf to keep his vision a secret, urging him not to share it with his brothers, for he feared they would conspire against him. Although Yusuf was young, he trusted his father's wisdom and obeyed his instruction, unaware of the trials that awaited him. He continued to live under his father's loving guidance, but the seeds of jealousy among his brothers had already taken root. They watched him with resentment, feeling overlooked and unappreciated, their hearts darkened by thoughts of eliminating the one they saw as a rival. The dream that was meant to be a glimpse of Yusuf's glorious future became the catalyst for a storm that would soon change the course of his life forever. Yusuf's brothers, consumed by jealousy, could no longer contain their resentment. They saw him as a threat to their own standing within the family, believing that their father's love for him had diminished their worth. Their envy turned into hatred, and soon, whispers of a sinister plan began to form among them. They deliberated amongst themselves, weighing their options on how to rid themselves of Yusuf once and for all. Some suggested killing him, but others hesitated, fearing the weight of such a sin. Instead, they settled on a different plan, one that would remove him from their lives without shedding his blood. They would cast him into a remote well, leaving him to be found by travelers who would take him far away. With their scheme in place, they approached their father with false sincerity, asking him to allow Yusuf to accompany them on an outing. They painted an image of brotherly love, assuring Yaqub that they only wished for Yusuf to enjoy the outdoors with them, to run freely and play without worry. But Yaqub was uneasy, sensing that something was amiss. He feared for Yusuf's safety, reluctant to send him away. The brothers, seeing his hesitation, persisted in their persuasion, even attempting to guilt him by suggesting that he did not trust them as responsible caretakers. Eventually, with great reluctance, Yaqub gave in, though his heart remained heavy with unease. As soon as they were far from home, the brothers revealed their true intentions. Without mercy, they grabbed Yusuf and dragged him toward the well. He struggled, pleading with them, but their hearts had hardened. They ignored his cries, overpowered him, and cast him into the darkness below. His voice echoed as he fell, swallowed by the depths of the cold, unforgiving well. The brothers, feeling no remorse, hurried back home, crafting a convincing lie before facing their father. They tore Yusuf's shirt, staining it with the blood of a slaughtered animal, and returned weeping, claiming that a wolf had devoured him while they were distracted. Yaqub, upon hearing their story, was overcome with grief, but was not deceived. He looked at the bloodied shirt and saw through their falsehood. If a wolf had attacked Yusuf, why was the shirt still intact? His heart ached with sorrow, yet he placed his trust in Allah, turning to patience and prayer. He knew, deep inside, that his beloved son was still alive, and though he could not see the path ahead, he held on to faith that one day Yusuf would return to him. Alone in the darkness of the well, Yusuf clung to hope. Though abandoned by his own flesh and blood, he did not despair. He prayed to Allah, seeking comfort and strength, believing that his fate was not in the hands of his brothers, but in the hands of his Creator. He waited, helpless yet unwavering in his faith, until salvation arrived. A passing caravan, traveling toward Egypt, stopped by the well to fetch water. As one of the men lowered a bucket, he felt an unexpected weight pulling against it. Curious, he peered down and was astonished to see a young boy clinging to the rope. With effort, they pulled Yusuf out, surprised by his striking beauty and noble appearance. Excited by their discovery, they immediately saw him as an opportunity, rather than a helpless child in need. The merchants, seeing profit in their hands, decided to take him with them to Egypt. Shackled and silenced, Yusuf had no choice but to go where they led him. He was far from home, torn away from his father, yet he remained patient. He knew that his journey, however painful, was part of something greater, something beyond his understanding. Upon reaching Egypt, the merchants wasted no time in selling him at the marketplace. He was placed among other slaves, treated as nothing more than an object to be purchased. People marveled at his appearance, recognizing his unique presence, and soon he caught the attention of a powerful man, Al-Aziz, the treasurer of Egypt. Al-Aziz saw something special in the boy and purchased him, not as a mere servant, but as someone he believed could be useful in his household. He instructed his wife to take good care of him, seeing potential beyond his status as a slave. Yusuf, despite his circumstances, found himself in a place of relative comfort compared to what could have been. Though he was still far from the home he once knew, he held on to faith, trusting that Allah's plan would unfold in time. His journey had taken him from a well to the heart of Egypt. And though he did not yet know what lay ahead, he remained steadfast, believing that his trials were only steps toward a greater destiny. As years passed, Yusuf grew into a man of striking beauty and wisdom. His presence was unlike any other, and those around him could not help but be drawn to his noble character. Despite being a servant in the household of Al-Aziz, he carried himself with dignity, earning the trust and admiration of his master. However, there was one person who saw him not only with admiration, but with overwhelming desire: Zuleika, the wife of Al-Aziz. She had watched him for years, his kindness, his patience, his grace. The feelings that had started as curiosity grew into obsession, and soon she could no longer contain them. One day when her husband was away, she orchestrated an encounter that would test Yusuf's faith. She ensured that the doors were locked and summoned him to her chambers. With a heart consumed by passion, she openly confessed her desires, beckoning him toward her. But Yusuf, fearing Allah above all else, immediately turned away. His heart pounded, not with temptation, but with the weight of the trial before him. He knew that giving in to her would mean betraying not only his master's trust, but, more importantly, his devotion to Allah. He responded firmly, seeking refuge in his Lord, declaring that those who commit such wrongs will never prosper. Seeing his resistance, Zuleika grew desperate. As he rushed to escape, she lunged forward, grabbing his shirt. The fabric tore as he pulled away, but before he could leave, the door swung open, revealing Al-Aziz himself. Shocked and humiliated, Zuleika acted swiftly, turning the blame onto Yusuf. She cried out, accusing him of trying to force himself upon her, twisting the truth to protect her own honor. Al-Aziz, torn between his wife's claim and the trust he had placed in Yusuf, sought counsel. A wise member of his household suggested examining Yusuf's shirt. If it was torn from the front, it would mean he had approached her. If torn from the back, it would prove he had been fleeing. The evidence was clear. The shirt was ripped from behind, proving Yusuf's innocence. Al-Aziz, though angered by his wife's deceit, chose to silence the matter, instructing Yusuf to keep it secret to protect their reputation. But the truth could not be contained. Rumors spread, and the women of the city whispered about Zuleika's obsession. In an attempt to justify herself, she invited them to a gathering, handing them knives along with fruit. When Yusuf was summoned before them, his beauty struck them so deeply that they gashed their own hands without realizing it. At that moment, Zuleika declared that this was the man she had been unable to resist. Still, Yusuf remained steadfast, praying that if his fate was to be tested further, prison was preferable to what she invited him toward. That night, the decision was made. Though innocent, Yusuf was sent to prison, his faith unshaken, his patience unbroken. Thrown into prison despite his innocence, Yusuf did not waver in faith. He accepted his fate with patience, knowing that Allah's wisdom was beyond human understanding. The walls that confined him did not break his spirit, and instead of drowning in despair, he turned his time in prison into an opportunity for growth. His conduct was exemplary, and his kindness toward fellow inmates soon made him a figure of trust and wisdom. Even in the darkest of places, he remained a beacon of light, demonstrating that true strength lies in unwavering faith. Among his fellow prisoners were two men who had once served in the royal palace, both troubled by strange dreams that left them restless. They had heard of Yusuf's wisdom and approached him, seeking an interpretation of their visions. One of them dreamt that he was serving wine to the king, while the other saw himself carrying a basket of bread on his head, from which birds were eating. Yusuf, before interpreting their dreams, reminded them of the oneness of Allah, using the moment to call them to faith. He assured them that it was not he who had the power to interpret dreams, but rather it was Allah who bestowed upon him the ability. With divine insight, Yusuf explained the meanings behind their visions. To the first man, he revealed that he would soon be restored to his former position as the king's cupbearer. To the second, he delivered grim news. His fate was sealed, and he would be executed, his body left for the birds to consume. Both men listened in awe, realizing that Yusuf's words carried a weight beyond human comprehension. As the first man prepared to leave, Yusuf made a humble request. He asked him to mention his name to the king, hoping that justice would finally be served. However, as time passed, Yusuf's plea was forgotten. The man, upon returning to the palace, became engrossed in his own restored life, leaving Yusuf to remain in the prison for several more years. Yet, despite being abandoned once more, he did not complain. He continued to place his trust in Allah, knowing that even in the waiting, there was purpose. His faith remained unshaken, and though the prison walls still surrounded him, he carried within him the certainty that his story was far from over. Years passed, and Yusuf remained in prison, patient and steadfast, trusting in Allah's plan. Though he had been forgotten by the man he had helped, his time would come when destiny called for him once again. One night, the king of Egypt had a dream that disturbed him deeply. In his vision, he saw 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears of grain alongside 7 dry ones. Puzzled and uneasy, he summoned his advisors and dream interpreters, demanding an explanation. Yet none could provide an answer, leaving the king frustrated and desperate for meaning. It was then that the former prisoner, the cupbearer, suddenly remembered Yusuf and his gift for interpreting dreams. Feeling remorseful for his forgetfulness, he immediately informed the king of the remarkable man he had met in prison, the one who had accurately predicted his fate. With urgency, the king sent for Yusuf, eager to hear the wisdom he possessed. When the messenger arrived, Yusuf did not rush to leave. Instead, he saw this as an opportunity to clear his name. He refused to step out of prison until the truth of his past was brought to light. The king, intrigued by Yusuf's sense of justice, summoned the women of the palace, including Zuleika. The women, who had once cut their hands upon seeing Yusuf's beauty, now bore witness to his innocence. When asked about the incident that had led to his imprisonment, they spoke the truth, declaring that they had no knowledge of any wrongdoing on his part. Finally, Zuleika herself could no longer conceal the lie. She confessed before the king that it was she who had attempted to seduce Yusuf and that he had remained pure and righteous all along. With her admission, Yusuf's honor was restored and the truth prevailed. Freed from prison, Yusuf stood before the king, a man of dignity and wisdom. When asked about the meaning of the dream, Yusuf explained that it was a vision of the years to come. Egypt would experience 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine so severe that it would consume all the stored provisions. He advised the king to prepare by storing grain during the years of prosperity so that the nation could survive the hardship that lay ahead. The king, deeply impressed by Yusuf's knowledge, saw in him more than just a dream interpreter. He recognized his wisdom, his integrity, and his leadership. Without hesitation, he elevated Yusuf to a position of great power, placing him in charge of Egypt's storehouses and entrusting him with the responsibility of saving the land from the coming famine. What had once been a prison cell had now become a gateway to greatness, and Yusuf's patience had led him to a destiny far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Yusuf's rise to power was not merely a stroke of luck, but the fulfillment of a divine plan that had been set in motion long before. He had endured betrayal, hardship, and imprisonment, yet through every trial, his faith had never wavered. Now, as he stood before the king of Egypt, he was no longer a mere prisoner or a forgotten slave, but a man of wisdom whose patience and righteousness had earned him the highest position in the land. The king, recognizing his unmatched intellect and foresight, entrusted him with the nation's survival, placing him in charge of managing Egypt's resources during the coming years of both prosperity and famine. With his newfound authority, Yusuf worked diligently to implement a plan that would secure the future of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, he oversaw the collection and careful storage of grain, ensuring that nothing went to waste. His strategy was methodical, and under his leadership, the storehouses of Egypt became full beyond measure. The people, who once may have overlooked him as a foreigner and former prisoner, now looked to him with admiration and trust, seeing the blessing of his wisdom in every decision he made. When the 7 years of famine arrived, the land suffered greatly. Just as Yusuf had predicted, crops withered, food became scarce, and despair spread among the people. Yet, unlike neighboring lands, Egypt was prepared. The storehouses, filled under Yusuf's careful guidance, provided sustenance for the people, and he distributed the grain with fairness and justice. His leadership was not only wise, but compassionate. He ensured that no one went hungry, proving that true power was not in wealth or status, but in the ability to serve and uplift others. Through patience and unwavering trust in Allah, Yusuf had been raised from the depths of a well to the heights of power, fulfilling the destiny that had been written for him since childhood. As the famine spread across the lands, it reached Canaan, where Yusuf's father and brothers lived. The drought left them desperate for food, and news traveled that Egypt was the only place where grain was available. Yaqub, still grieving the loss of Yusuf, but holding on to hope, sent his sons to seek provisions. Unbeknownst to them, the man in charge of distributing food was the very brother they had betrayed and left for dead. When Yusuf's brothers arrived in Egypt, they stood before him, unaware of his true identity. Time had changed him. He was no longer the helpless boy they had thrown into the well, but a man of power and authority. Yet despite everything they had done to him, Yusuf felt no hatred in his heart. He looked at them with a mixture of sorrow and understanding, knowing that fate had brought them before him once more. He asked them about their family, and they told him of their father and youngest brother, Binyamin, who had remained behind. Yusuf, seizing the opportunity, devised a plan to bring his full family together again. He provided them with grain, but instructed them to return with their younger brother if they wished for more provisions in the future. The brothers returned home and told Yaqub of the ruler's demand. The old prophet hesitated, fearing another loss, but as their need grew dire, he reluctantly allowed Binyamin to go. When they arrived again in Egypt, Yusuf took his younger brother aside and revealed his identity to him in secret. He reassured Binyamin, telling him not to grieve over what their brothers had done. But before letting them leave, Yusuf placed a royal cup in Binyamin's bag and had his men accuse them of theft. When the cup was found, the brothers pleaded for their younger brother's release, but Yusuf insisted on keeping him. This moment tested them, forcing them to confront their past actions. Their desperation showed remorse, and for the first time they felt the pain of losing a brother, just as they had once caused their father to suffer. The lesson was unfolding before them, and their fate was now in Yusuf's hands. When the brothers returned to Canaan without Binyamin, their father Yaqub was overcome with grief. He had already lost Yusuf years ago, and now another beloved son had been taken from him. His sorrow deepened, and he wept so much that he eventually lost his eyesight. Yet, through all his suffering, he never abandoned his faith in Allah. He refused to believe that Yusuf was gone forever, sensing deep within his heart that his son was still alive. His sons, seeing his despair, tried to console him, but he could not be comforted. Instead, he turned to prayer, seeking patience and strength, knowing that Allah's wisdom was beyond human understanding. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Yusuf observed the distress of his brothers. He had seen their regret and the guilt that had settled in their hearts over what they had done to him so many years ago. The time had come to reveal the truth. When they returned once more to plead for food, broken by their hardships, he spoke to them in a way that unsettled them. He asked if they remembered what they had done to Yusuf. Their faces paled as they realized the impossible. This ruler before them was the very brother they had betrayed. Fear gripped them as they imagined the vengeance he could unleash upon them. They had wronged him in the worst way, and now he held absolute power over them. But instead of anger, Yusuf spoke words of mercy. He told them not to be afraid, for he had chosen to forgive them. He reassured them that what they had intended for harm, Allah had turned into something good. He then gave them his shirt and instructed them to place it over their father's face. As soon as Yaqub received the shirt, he smelled the scent of his long-lost son, and in that moment, his vision was miraculously restored. Overcome with joy and gratitude, he knew that the years of patience and sorrow had not been in vain. Yusuf was alive, and the family that had been torn apart was finally on the path to being reunited once more. With his vision restored and his heart filled with renewed hope, Yaqub wasted no time. He gathered his family and set out for Egypt, eager to see the son he had mourned for so many years. The journey was long, but every step brought him closer to the moment he had prayed for countless times. His sons, still in awe of everything that had transpired, walked alongside him, carrying the weight of their past mistakes. The guilt that had once haunted them now gave way to relief, for they knew that Yusuf had chosen forgiveness over vengeance. In Egypt, Yusuf awaited his family's arrival with anticipation. Though he had risen to a position of immense power, he had never forgotten the love of his father or the pain of separation. When he finally saw Yaqub and the rest of his family approaching, he rushed to greet them. Emotions overwhelmed him as he embraced his father, feeling the warmth of his presence after so many years apart. Yaqub, too, could hardly contain his joy. His son, whom he had thought lost forever, now stood before him, a man of wisdom, strength, and honor. Yusuf then turned to his brothers, not with resentment, but with love. He reassured them once more that there was no anger in his heart. What had happened was all part of Allah's plan, and everything had unfolded as it was meant to. He reminded them that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, patience and faith always lead to a greater purpose. With reverence, he raised his parents onto the throne beside him, a moment that mirrored the vision he had seen in his childhood dream. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars had now bowed before him, not in servitude, but in love and recognition. The prophecy had been fulfilled, and Yusuf's journey, filled with trials, had led to the ultimate reward of reunion and peace. As the family stood together once more, they gave thanks to Allah, knowing that His wisdom had guided them through every sorrow and every joy. The story of Prophet Yusuf is more than just a historical account. It is a timeless lesson in faith, patience, and forgiveness. Every stage of his journey teaches something profound, reminding believers that life is a series of tests meant to shape the soul and strengthen the heart. From the moment he was separated from his father, Yusuf endured betrayal, hardship, and injustice, yet he never allowed these trials to make him bitter. Instead, he remained steadfast in his faith, trusting that Allah's plan was greater than the suffering he endured. Even when thrown into a well by his own brothers, he did not despair, but clung to hope, knowing that his fate was not in their hands, but in the hands of his Creator. Patience is one of the most powerful themes in his story. Whether as a slave, a prisoner, or a man awaiting justice, Yusuf never questioned why hardships befell him. He did not allow anger to consume him, nor did he lose faith when forgotten in prison. He understood that Allah's timing is perfect, and what is meant for a person will always reach them, no matter how long it takes. His ability to endure difficulties with grace serves as a lesson that patience is not merely waiting, but maintaining trust in Allah while waiting. Forgiveness is another powerful lesson. Yusuf had every reason to seek revenge on his brothers when they stood before him in need. He had been wronged in ways that few could ever forgive, yet he chose to rise above resentment. Instead of punishing them, he reminded them that everything that happened was part of a divine plan. He understood that hatred only weighs down the heart, while forgiveness sets the soul free. His story also teaches humility. Despite his power and status in Egypt, he never let arrogance touch his heart. He remained grateful, recognizing that everything he achieved was by Allah's will. He used his position not for personal gain, but to help those in need. His wisdom and leadership were guided by kindness and fairness, showing that true greatness lies in serving others with sincerity. The story of Prophet Yusuf is a reminder that even in moments of darkness, there is always light ahead. Those who hold on to faith, remain patient through trials, and choose forgiveness over vengeance will always find that Allah's mercy is greater than any hardship. His journey from the depths of a well to the heights of power proves that no matter how dire a situation seems, Allah is always in control, and His plan is always better than what one can imagine.